Steve McCurry is with us. If you've just tuned in, he's a photographer for National Geographic. Just recently had an assignment where he shot the last roll of Kodachrome film to come off the production line. We're also talking about one of the photographs that really shaped his career, that photograph on the cover of National Geo in 1985 of the young Afghan woman. Just a startling, beautiful photograph. He went back and they rediscovered her again, and we're talking about what happened after that. To the phones, to Keith in Mankato. Hi, Keith. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, no problem.
Go ahead.
If I were to get my hands on that last roll, I'm an expeditionary photographer. I'm going to school here in Mankato State. And I was traveling around the country this summer, and I drove through this town in northern Nevada called Hawthorne. It's this little tiny town that used to be an ammo depot back in World War II.
Huh.
So you come over this hill in the desert, and you just see miles and miles of bunkers in this valley.
Really?
And then as you get into the town, it's super creepy because there's these high walls all along the roads and everything. You just see the sign for a Navy submarine base in the middle of the Nevada desert next to Hawthorne Lake, I believe it's called. And it's just one of the most interesting places I've ever been. I took a few digital stills there, and I would just love to go there and do some landscapes in Kodachrome.
Wow. So it's eerie, Keith, because it's abandoned? Or are there people living there?
There's still people living there. But you walk into anywhere in that town, and it's got that small town feeling to it. But you can tell that there's not many outsiders coming through there. So, and I definitely look like an outsider. I come in at the time. I had an 8-inch mohawk, and I'm covered in tattoos, and so it was definitely a different experience.
You're a brave young man, Keith. Steve.
Well, if you're using Kodachrome, you better hurry because they're going to discontinue processing this film at the end of the year, or possibly even earlier than that in December. The last remaining lab in the world is in Parsons, Kansas, and it's a great lab, wonderful people. But they're the last lab standing when it comes to processing your Kodachrome. The labs in New York and L.A. and in Japan and Australia, they've all gone away. And the only chance left is this lab in Parsons, Kansas. And once they stop that line, that processing line, that's the end of the story completely. So I think if you process a roll of Kodachrome in other chemistry, you'll just get a black and white image. But that's will be the absolute final nail in the coffin. But it's been Kodachrome was the greatest film, and we'll always look back in fond memories and honor its past and the memory of that.
Keith, I wish you well with the photography career, if that's where you're headed. Thank you very much for the call. Let's go back to the phones here to Mike in Minnetrista. Hi, Mike.
Hi. Hey, Steve mentioned earlier, and I've heard this before, the story of 300 and 400 rolls of film per assignment. And my question is, what happens to all the other pictures that aren't used? Are they in storage at National Geographic? Did they go to the Smithsonian?
Yeah, interesting question.
Good question. Well, if your staff, and I was never staff, the staff at photographs stay at National Geographic. If you were a contract or a freelance photographer, you actually, all those transparencies are given back to the photographer. And in my case, they're all in my office. I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 1 million transparencies filed away in order of story and country where I made them.
1 million? I mean, what, stored how, Steve?
They're all stored in 4-drawer filing cabinets in sleeves. I think I supported one sleeve. They had these plastic sleeves. I think I supported the whole company for years. And I have, kind of dozens of filing cabinets full of pictures. But it's a daunting task. And to scan those pictures now is an endless project. I'm sure Jim Brandenburg faces a similar situation where you have, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of your Kodachrome transparencies, and you're to try and scan all of that for posterity, and to actually use those in your work now is a kind of a daunting task.
Steve, you ever spend much time thinking about the shots that got away, or maybe it was that single shot that you thought you had that you didn't?
I never look back on those kind of situations. There we have, I think we've all had sort of, nightmare situations where you thought you had film in the camera and you didn't, and you've shot all these kind of wonderful pictures only to discover that, there was no film in the camera. And there was other cases where you had your the camera settings to the wrong ASA, and you were at ASA 400, and then but there were lots of situations where I had the wrong lens on and missed a picture, or was changing lenses, or I wasn't ready, or I missed the right moment. But I think you just have to move on and not dwell on all these sort of mistakes, because Lord knows that we've made a lot of them in our careers.
And after all, you have those million slides that you have taken, and you can always console yourself with those, can't you?
Absolutely. I remember one case where there was this wolf in this Baffin Island situation, and he was poised in this perfect place with this perfect light. And Jim was telling me he was out of film. He was changing. It was cold. It was like, 50 degrees below zero. And he thought he was going to miss the shot, that the wolf was going to wander off. And he's fumbling. He's nervous. The wolf stayed there. And he was able to get the film into the camera. And he shot. And he actually got the picture miraculously. But more often than not, what happens in those situations is, as you're frantically trying to get prepared, your subject moves or changes position, and that's and you're just heartbroken because this thing, which was going to be your best picture, just evaporated into thin
air. To the phones to Scott in Minnetonka. Hi, Scott. I appreciate you waiting.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
I don't have any Kodachrome, but I do have a box of Polaroid Type 55. I'm trying to figure out what to shoot. You mentioned the benefits of using digital SLR because of the instant results, and I use digital all the time. At the same time, I feel that digital renders faces looking a little bit plasticky. If you shoot digital now, sort of like canvas for a painting, do you miss the texture of film?
Well, there was a quality to film which is somehow lost in digital, but I think by the time you scan the transparencies and they get onto a disc and they go to the printer or they get on a piece of paper, I think as the years go by and digital photography, all this money in research and development is going into making better digital cameras, and I think that possibly your point would have been more valid 5, 10, 15 years ago, but today I think that it's almost imperceptible. Or in some cases, I would say that digital images are better than film. I think it's just, and as we move forward, the digital photography is only going to get better and better, because there's this race between Canon and Sony and Nikon. And recently at the Photokina, this big, huge camera fair in Cologne, Germany, Sony had half of an entire floor of one of the showrooms devoted to still photography. So it shows that they're right nipping at the heels of Kodak and Nikon.
Steve, one of the things that other accomplished photographers who have been on the program have said is that the landscape of their childhoods remain fairly influential in the way that they approach photography. And I'm interested in where you grew up and whether you also have had that experience of, remembering what it looked like, through your eyes as a child.
Well, I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and was kind of had a kind of a wild youth. It wasn't until I was 19 that I got interested in travel, and actually made my first trip to Europe, and then subsequently went to Africa and Central America, and that really kind of became very influential, and I've been traveling heavily ever since. I would say I'm on the road 9 months of the year, and I have been for, I don't know, the past 30 years. So I would say that my life took a real turn at that point when I was 19, and I haven't really photographed much, I would say, in either Philadelphia where I grew up or even in New York where I live now. Most of my attention is really in Asia, South Asia, and I just most of my work is actually in other countries.
This has been such a pleasure, Steve. And I'm really grateful we caught you while you weren't abroad, and now hearing how much you travel. Thank you so much for the time today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Steve McCurry with us, a National Geographic photographer, and we talked about his experience of shooting with the last production roll of Kodachrome. Kodak, after 75 years, not going to produce it anymore. If you missed part of the conversation, you can find it in the archives a little later today and throughout next week.